Barrett, I wanted to give you a chance to talk to the public. We talked about your comments to the judge saying that this isn't about the rule of law anymore. We now have the rule of law enforcement. Tell us what you want to tell us about your trial now that the gag order has been taken off.
Well, the first thing I should mention is that aside from what I put forth in the article for the Daily Beast about a month ago, and aside from what I'll tell you about today, the great majority of the things that people need to know about the trial are still sealed, and that should continue for about 6 months. So, in addition to all the very egregious things that have happened, there's a great deal more that's still not public. Now, regarding the trial, I guess the basic lesson here is that the federal government can do whatever it wants, essentially, within the Department of Justice, within the federal justice system. That's clear from the extent of the perjury, very demonstrable perjury that occurred in this case. Again, some of which is visible, some of which can be confirmed publicly through documents, some of which is still sealed. And that's really what I've tried to convey to the judge in that the allocution I gave, is that when you allow this perjury to occur, we're getting away from the rule of law. We're getting to a situation in which we're going through the forms. We're meeting in a nice, very pretty hardwood room with paintings, and there's a big, nice wood podium and very pretty robes and all that. But you're missing something, which is the rule of law. And to the extent the rule of law isn't there, you're going to see things like Anonymous. You're going to see things like WikiLeaks. You're going to keep seeing them until we get the rule of law.
One of the things, reading the transcript, the judge dressed down the prosecutor for not referring to you as Mr. Brown. And as you're just talking about, you got this fancy room with all the trappings and everything, but they're grinding the rule of law into the ground. And I thought, he's worried about being polite to people while he's railroading this whole process. That was amazing.
That kind of thing is very important to establishment characters in D.C. It's very important to the people who have that federal government mentality. I would have preferred him to object at the last hearing when the prosecutor asked the FBI agent, how long has Barrett Brown been an anarchist? Mm-hmm. That would have been the time to object, when they started asking about my political ideology. Incidentally, this thing about me being an anarchist, which is true, that actually comes up in a couple of other documents, including the gag order, when they asked for me to be gagged. Me being an anarchist was one of the reasons they cited. In one of the documents that's still sealed regarding my sentencing, they call for me to get additional prison time because I'm an anarchist, and thus more likely, apparently, to commit crimes. So there's a lot of egregious things that, on an individual basis, really should have been a national story, on each given thing. Obviously, the seizure of the Declaration of Independence, in a more perfect world, would have been a major news story.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the world we're in, it didn't quite rate national coverage.
Yes, that was amazing. Tell the audience about that.
Well, among the items, and you can see this, and this is links to from my Daily Beast article, my post Cyberpunk Indentured Servitude, which you can find online. We have the list of items they seized as evidence of a crime, and it's computers, it's my notes. There's only one book they took. I have a lot of books in my apartment at the time, and the only book they took was a copy of the Declaration of Independence, just this little pocket copy.
Well, that's radical.
Never have to explain why they took it. I'm assuming it has to do something to do with the FBI memorandums a few years ago when they said, patriots, militia types, they like the Constitution, they might have a copy of the Constitution. Thus, having a copy of the Constitution might be evidence of a crime. I'm assuming they just sort of got it mixed up. One of those Enlightenment documents. FBI agents aren't as educated as we might expect them to be, or might hope them to be anyway. So they just grabbed it and then, never came up at the trial. Would have been, even for them, it would have been a little much to actually discuss that, in the course of the trial. So.
Well, of course, yeah, they never want us to read even the first paragraph of that when it says we create governments to establish our rights, and when they destroy our rights, we have the duty and the obligation to alter or abolish those governments. One other thing I wanted to get to, and then just you can talk, I'll let Joe ask you a question here. One of the things you mentioned at the end of the article was 2 days before your sentencing, the Department of Justice withheld from the defense team chat transcripts from Jeremy Hammond. Tell us about that.
This call is from a federal prison.
Sorry, that's one of those charming little reminders I have once in a while. Yes, it actually came out 2 days before in an article by, I think, Dale Cameron, that, in fact, and this is something we had no idea of, the Department of Justice had documents that show quite demonstrably that I was not a co-conspirator in the Stratfor hack, which was a major point, of the DOJ's favor in getting me additional prison time, this claim that I was somehow a co-conspirator. And they withheld that evidence. And the evidence is now public. It was made public right before my sentencing, and this is something that, again, in a more perfect world, the judge would care about just as much as he cares about whether I'm called Mr. Brown or Barrett or Humpty Dumpty or whatever. But it just didn't quite come to his attention. Didn't quite interest him very much. It's actually just goes to show this particular case. Obviously it's inconvenient for me to be in prison, but on the other hand, we have a great example here. This whole case, the investigation, all the way to the sentencing, of how this system works. Particularly if the DOJ wants you, very much wants you to do prison time. It's a great example of how they're able to get away with these things, even in the public eye. And the other story here, of course, is how poorly the mainstream media does in keeping up with these things.
Absolutely. Well, we spoke on the phone the other day, Barrett, and you were talking about. I was asking you what you knew about the Michael Hastings, case, and how the FBI came out and said that they weren't looking into him. And you said that you believe that 99% that FBI was definitely looking to him.
Yeah, it's even aside from the other reasons they would have to look into him, it's absolutely ludicrous for them to say that, because with regards to my group, Project PM, which runs the echelon2.org website, which was really what this case was all about, they subpoenaed the IP address information for everyone who's ever contributed to that website of ours. And so these are just sort of small players within Project PM. Now, Michael Hastings, on the other hand, as I noted in a Vanity Fair article a number of years ago when he was still alive and when I was writing about him, he was instrumental when I was first creating Project PM in helping me sort of flesh out the philosophy of it. So the idea that he, who was in contact with me regarding Project PM, was never investigated regarding Project PM is absolutely 100% ludicrous. And again, that's in addition to the other reasons they and certain other organizations would have to be investigating and harassing him. He obviously did a great job. He's best known for sort of forcing McChrystal to resign a number of years ago, but really his article exposing the PSYOPs campaign used by, I believe, a two-star general in Afghanistan against visiting senators, that's something I cite constantly in my articles for The Guardian or wherever as evidence of here's what these people are willing to do even to your elected officials. And it is absolutely ludicrous that their claim that they weren't investigating. They absolutely were, almost certainly on several different issues.
I know we don't have much time, Barrett, before we get cut off, but Paul Joseph Watson is in the UK, and he's got a quick question for you.
This call
Paul?
is from a federal prison.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Barrett, obviously one of the charges is the fact that he merely provided a link to the Stratfor email leaks. What kind of precedent does that create for web publishers, for activists going forward?
Well, it means that the federal government now has a vastly expanded toolkit by which to come after anyone that they wanted to come after to begin with, whether or not they've actually committed a crime. By criminalizing the act of linking, especially in my case when you don't even know what you're linking to, and had no interest or use for in this case, it turned out to be credit card numbers in addition to other information that I ended up linking to, which was already public. That sets a terrible precedent by which journalists, researchers are now at risk. And of course, there are some journalists and researchers who are a danger to the government, and especially the DOJ. And thus, the DOJ now has one more option by which to come after them. Quinn Norton, who writes for Wired and who testified at my hearing, she explained a few days afterwards, after this decision, that she was going to stop doing security reporting now. It's too dangerous. She told this to the judge. The judge at my hearing said, I'm going to go ahead and hit him with this additional year in prison for the linking. I don't think it's going to be a concern to journalists, which is bizarre because, of course, journalists have been expressing concern about those charges ever since they were made 2 years ago. And even right after my sentencing, there was a number of articles in U.S. News and World Report, Columbia Journalism Review, The Intercept, again, expressing concern about this. So the judge is not a brilliant flower of jurisprudence or anything, really. He's just sort of a puppet of the DOJ, unfortunately. Not a bad guy, just doesn't know what he's doing. And so, again, alas, that's that situation we're in now. Now, hopefully something will come of this in the case in general. Hopefully people will make use of what's happened in my case to bring some attention to the mainstream. Because, again, this affects journalists, and when you start coming after journalists, then you have the potential to get journalists' attention.
Well, so especially when you're quoting somebody like a Fox News contributor.
Sorry?
Especially when you were quoting someone, Fox News contributor, and then they use that against you, that quote.
Yeah, and that's really, I think, the number one most bizarre thing in a comedy of bizarre errors. The fact that a Fox News commentator went on television and talks about how we should murder Julian Assange. Mm-hmm. I quoted that on my Twitter account. And of course, Julian Assange is someone who I respect and he respects me. We have sort of an association. That ended up in my indictment as if it was something that I said or approved of. And even after we pointed out, in a filing that, this Barrett Brown didn't say this. This is some other guy that Barrett Brown obviously wouldn't get along with saying it. The prosecution stuck with it. Instead of saying, oh, this is a mistake, or you're right, they stuck with it and said, yes, he's promoting this quote, which is, again, it really raises the question of if it's a terrible quote that even promoting gets you indicted, then how come the guy who said it on national television hasn't been indicted? And the answer, of course, is because the guy on Fox News is not a danger to the DOJ. He like commentators of both left and right, is an establishment character on his own. He dislikes WikiLeaks, dislikes sort of anti-government things of that nature, and thus will never get that kind of indictment. And that goes into another big problem here is the selectivity, the picking and choosing the DOJ can do and has done, as we exposed, as we showed with the H.B. Gary and Team Themis scandal in 2011. The picking and choosing they can do, who they prosecute under these very broad statutes. In addition to that, the bizarre sort of underground concierge service the DOJ seems to provide to certain companies that happen to have common enemies with them. That's something I don't think we have time to get into, but if people want to go to echelon2.org, they'll see some of the research that really kicked off this trend, that really sort of forced the DOJ to come after me. The research that Anonymous and my to illegal activity by the DOJ in certain companies, and that's really what this is all about. It's a whole other story. We're about to be cut off in about a minute or so. Do you have any final questions?
Just final comments about where you go from now. Do you have a appeal process that is coming through because of all these different things that are going to be coming to light in about 6 months?
Unfortunately, we gave up our right to appeal when we pled, which is and then us having done that, the DOJ knew that they could now start violating the law over and over again about it. So, unfortunately, no. So we'll see what happens in 6 months. What we're playing now is sort of an information game. They've had their shot at me. Now I get my shot at them via the media. So that will develop over the next 6 months, and so people should stay tuned, I suppose.
Well, so sorry that this happened to you, but please keep us informed, especially after they unseal these records that show the different ways that they played with the information in your trial.
Yeah, and people can follow this at our Twitter.
I think they just cut him off. I'll give that to you. And his Twitter account is twitter.com/free Barrett. That's FREEBARRETT_. He also has on Facebook.com free Barrett Brown. And of course, they disconnected it, just automatically disconnects him on a certain amount of time. Again, if you want to follow this on Twitter, what he was about to give you was free Barrett _, and then the Facebook account, free Barrett Brown. And also echelon2.org, ECHELON, the number 2.org.